Hello, everyone. It's my great honor to be invited to give a talk on this 2021 SDGs and Happiness Symposium. My topic is about the correlation between SDGs and happiness. Well, first, let me briefly introduce myself to you. I'm currently a professor in the KDI School of Public Policy and Management. My name is Shen Wang. My main research is about economic development and happiness. Well, today I will briefly introduce you the correlation, particularly empirical correlation between SDGs and happiness. Well, this is the outline of my today's talk. There are four sections here. Number one is about the introduction to SDGs and happiness. So here I will briefly introduce you the concept of SDGs and also the definition of happiness. In the second part, I will introduce you the empirical correlation between SDG index and happiness. In the third part, I will introduce you the relative importance of SDGs in explaining the variance in happiness. And then in the last part, I will summarize the findings. Well, the first part, I will introduce you the concept of SDGs and happiness. Well, we all know that SDGs refer to the Sustainable Development Goals, which were ratified in 2015 as a successor to the Millennium Development Goals and have a target date of 2030. Well, the SDGs include 17 goals. We can group them into different small groups. The first one could be the economic goals, including number 4, 8, and 9. And then the social goals, including the number 1, number 5, and number 10. And then the number 3 is about health, number 16 about law, and there are many environment goals, which include number 2, 6, 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And the last one is about the partnerships for achieving all the goals. Well, happiness, or sometimes it's called subjective well-being, generally referred to a person's cognitive and affective evaluations of his or her life. The studies on happiness in economics were initiated by Professor Richard Easterling in one of his articles published in 1974. Well, since then, the literature has been expanded very rapidly, particularly since the late 1990s. Well, Easterling's study is mainly about the correlation between income and happiness. Well, the famous Easterling paradox refers to that at any particular time, the richer individuals are happier than the poor ones. However, over time, the society did not become happier as it became richer. Well, this seems to be a puzzle. Well, many researchers later were trying to figure out what's going on behind. Well, it also attracted the attention from the international organizations. For example, the OECD released guidelines on measuring subject well-being in 2013, while trying to urge member states to collect happiness data for the policy purpose. Well, happiness is often used to measure individual well-being and also to evaluate many policies. World Health Report is a flagship study on global happiness and policies launched annually by the Sustainable Development Solution Networks since 2012. I have been involved in this project since the very beginning. So the main happiness measure used in this report is called Cantril Ladder, or the Cantril Self-Anchoring Striving Scale, given by Cantril in 1965. The data was taken from the Gallup World Poll, which covered more than 150 countries all over the world. And this is an annual survey which enable us to give the global ranking of happiness every year. Well, the country ladder asks this question. Please imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 at the bottom and 10 at the top. On which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel you stand at this time? So basically, it's self-evaluated questions to ask people to evaluate their own life. Well, to investigate the empirical correlation between SDGs and happiness, we use the SDG index data sets and the Gallup World Poll to test the correlation between the SDGs and happiness. Well, next I will present you the empirical correlation between SDG index and happiness. Well, what are the main findings? First, we find that there is a strong correlation between achieving a sustainable development and self-reported measures of well-being or happiness. So there is a strong correlation. Well, most SDGs were positively correlated with well-being or happiness. The goal number 12, responsible consumption and production, and goals number 13 on climate action were negatively correlated with subject well-being or happiness. Well, this raised the challenge of policy action in these areas since they run counter to the happiness. Well, given that lowering well-being erodes the support for incumbent governments, it may make such policies very difficult to implement. I mean, it's very difficult to implement the goal number 12 and goal number 13 because they were negatively correlated with subject well-being. Well, let's see this figure. We show the correlation between SDG index score and the happiness score. The SDG index score are placed on the horizontal axis, and happiness score are placed on the vertical axis. Well, the red line here shows the empirical correlation. We can see that there is a strong parity correlation, while we can also see that the correlation is higher among the countries which have a higher SDG index score, because we can see there is a higher slope on the top. Well, all the figures and empirical results are taken from Dinev and Sachs 2020 paper, which is a chapter of the World Health Report 2020. Well, in addition to this figure, we also show the empirical correlation. Well, this is a simple correlation table for each SDG index and the happiness for the global data and also for the 6 regions data. We show the correlation between each of the 17 goals and happiness scores. Well, let's look at the column 3, which show the correlation for when we're using all the countries. Well, the correlation between the no poverty, the number 1 SDG goal, and happiness is 0.65. And it is significant at 1% level. Here, the 1 star means 1% statistical significance level. While the zero hunger has a correlation coefficient 0.62, which is also very big. And same for number 3, number 4, 5, 6, and many others. However, we can also see that number 12 and number 13 are negatively correlated with happiness, as we already talked before. Well, a couple of other, a couple of the SDG index have no correlation with happiness, including the left below water and left on land, and also the partnership for the goals. Well, why there is a negative correlation between SDG number 12 and SDG number 3 with happiness? When we did a further study, we present the result in this table. So basically, both number 12 and number 13 could be highly correlated with our GDP level or income level. So therefore, in this additional regression tables, we control for GDP per capita in both columns. And the first column shows the result for SDG number 12, which is about the responsible consumption and production. Well, even we control for GDP per capita, we still see a negative correlation there, which is also statistically significant. Well, this may be due to that the SDG 12 is highly correlated with the quantity of waste created through consumption production, rather than the proportional responsible production and consumption. So this negative correlation may suggest that advancing responsible assumption on production comes with a trade-off in terms of current happiness. Well, this could be another explanation. Well, it's also possible that this measure does not really capture the responsible consumption and production. It just captures the quantity of waste produced from consumption. Well, for the number 13, after controlling for the GDP per capita, the negative correlation disappears, and we see a positive correlation between climate action and happiness, but it is not significant. Well, this may imply that there is a very high correlation between the climate action and the income level in those countries. Well, anyway, we cannot have a firm conclusion on this matter, but it may suggest that there is a trade-off between the SDG 12 and 13 with the current happiness. Well, this is the section 2. Next, in section 3, I will show you the relative importance of SDGs in explaining the variance in happiness. Well, this figure shows the proportion explained by each of the 17 SD index. Well, the no poverty, the number 1 goal, can explain 6% of the total variation in happiness between countries, as shown in this figure. And then zero hunger for another 6%, good health for 9%, education 6%, gender equality 6%, clean water 8%, affordable and clean energy 7%, and decent work and economic growth 11%. This is pretty big, and much bigger than all those previous goals. Well, the next one, which is about industry innovation and infrastructure, explains 13%, which is the largest one. This shows the importance of the infrastructure. Well, the sustainable cities and communities is also important, which is about 5%, and responsible consumption 11%. And the peace, justice, and strong, this is about 6%. However, we can see that this reducing inequalities and climate action, left below water and left on land, or contribute to a very small variance, which shows that those economic, social, and legal factors are more important than those environmental factors. Well, this is using the global data. Well, if we group them into based on their features, we can see that the economic goals account for 31%, which is the largest one. Well, the second largest one is the health. Third one is social factors, social goals, and fourth one is the law. Well, the environment goals is the smallest one. Well, this is the importance of these 5 groups of factors in explaining the variance in happiness. Well, there are a lot of actually regional variations. So next, we can see the relative importance of SDGs groups for each of the 6 regions. This page shows the relative importance for Americas and Asia. While in America, we can see that the most important factor is the health, and the second one is economic factor. And in terms of Asia, in case of Asia, the most important one is still economic factor, while the social factor and health factor are almost the same, about 20%. Well, the law accounts for 26%. The least important one is environmental factor. Well, in Europe, as shown in the left-hand side figure, the economic factors account for 34%, and the lower and social factors are roughly the same, around 24 23%. And environment goals is very, very small, only 1%. Well, in MENA, I mean the Middle East and Northern Africa, the economic factor is also the most important one. And the second most important one is health. Well, in former Soviet Union, economic factor is also the most important one. It accounts for more than half. Well, in sub-Saharan Africa, the most important one is social factor, and second important one is economic factor. Well, these two are very similar. Well, surprisingly, the environment factor in sub-Saharan Africa accounts for a quarter. Well, this is probably the largest among all the 6 regions. Well, in summary, you can see that there is a very big variance across regions in terms of the relative importance of the SDG groups. Well, next, I'm gonna briefly summarize what we have learned from the empirical investigation about the correlation between SDG index and happiness. So first, we find that there is a strong correlation between achieving sustainable development goals and happiness. And this relative importance of SDGs varies across regions. In many regions, the economic factors are the most important one. However, in sub-Saharan Africa, the most important thing is environmental factors. Well, when we look at the correlation atom by atom, we can see that most SDGs are positively correlated with well-being. However, the goal number 12 and number 13 are negatively correlated with happiness. Well, even though we know that in the literature, in the empirical literature, the Environmental Protection Index is positively correlated with happiness. Well, this together may suggest that the outcome of environmental policies is positively correlated with happiness, but the process of reaching those policies may not be. It's like we always want to enjoy a good environment, but we don't want to pay a price for it. Well, it thus may imply that implementing these environmental policies requires intergenerational reciprocity. It's like we probably need to sacrifice our contemporary happiness in order to achieve a better environmental outcomes in the future. But we know that this is probably very difficult. It's very difficult to achieve. All right, so this is a very simple introduction to the correlation between SDGs and happiness based on the existing data we have. Actually, this is only based on the cross-sectional correlation between the 2 factors. We hope to conduct more studies in the future to get better results when we have a panel data. All right, so this is my talk. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.